Hello everyone, welcome to the Melting Pot podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Monkhouse. The Melting Pot is as a result of my hunger for optimizing business performance, scaling up organizations, corporate culture, customer addiction, building high-performing teams, along with a few other obsessions along the way. I've spent the last several years working for and with some of the most successful, top-performing companies in the world. And this podcast is my attempt to synthesize what I've learned along the way to help you build a high-quality business and live a more fulfilling life. If you enjoy the podcast, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at dominicmonkhouse.com. Today I'm chatting to Spencer Gallagher and Pete Hoole of Cactus. They were the founder, CEO and CFO respectively of a digital agency, Blue Halo, that they scaled up and sold. And what they've been doing after that is running their business called Cactus, which is a consultancy that specializes in helping digital agency owners get on that tricky point of the curve from sort of 500,000, 750, past 1 million, 1.5 million, and on their way to 3 to 5 million. And they've both recently co-authored a book called Agencynomics, which we'll talk about, and some fascinating things data that they've captured along the way. The impact on employee net promoter score from organizational structure, and also some of the things that they found out around marketing, and the lead flow 30-30-10 is one of the things that Spencer will share with us. A wide-ranging and fascinating discussion, I thought. So I hope you enjoy it. Cheers.
So I'm Spencer Gallagher. My life started with an agency in 1999, which I built through to 2008. Sold it to a big ad agency, and then called Gyro. Now they're part of the Dentsu network. And then in 2011, my former FTP, we started Cactus as joint partners, and we are today the leading consultancy helping agencies scale. More recently, Pete, you better say this bit, otherwise I'll do all the talking.
More recently,
we wrote a book.
We've written a book.
And who are you?
Pete Hoole. I'm Spencer's business partner. Worked with him since the Blue Halo days back in 2004, all the way through to now. My area of specialism is CFO for agencies, kind of from the 1 million size to 5 million size in terms of helping them structure their finances for growth, etc., around those kind of metrics.
Fabby. And Cactus, how long's that been going?
8 years now, isn't it? 2011, 12, I think you started. 8 years.
And you've got some fab stats, because I think you sent out a New Year's email, which was sort of, we've helped this many people grow this many agencies. Can you get any of those stats off the top of your head?
Apart from the ones we made up.
No, we I think it was actually last year we stopped and we wrote down all of the clients we'd helped. It was about 85 clients over the past 8 years. And I say 85 more of the sort of full-time clients. We've actually helped over 1,000 agencies in some shape or form over the past 8 years. But from the 85, we had a spreadsheet, and we worked out the average growth had been just over 85%, weirdly enough, per annum, which was pretty outstanding. And I guess there's some element of there's some smaller agencies in there that have had massive rapid growth, several 100%. But and then obviously as they get much bigger, they sort of start to slow down. But as an average, and actually, several of those clients have been very capable of sort of qualifying for Deloitte Tech Fast 50 and European Fast 500 type league tables and stuff. So,
what size agency do you typically work with?
But typically, they're around 750 to 1 million in fees and upwards.
Uh-huh.
Most of them are looking to grow in some way, shape, or form to get to 3, 4, 5 million with a decent EBIT. So that we used to say, well, they're going to grow and sell, but it's more around having choices these days. They get to that level and they can say, well, we're going to take the agency on further, do some acquisitions, sell, or someone are just enjoying it and going to keep growing.
Yes,
the sadistic ones.
At 750,000, so by the time they get to 4 million, either the sadistic or those pains, you've helped them get rid of those pains.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think when you get to 1 million EBIT and above, from an agency perspective, there's lots more advisors involved, and maybe they've raised more money, they've got more private equity, or they may have big group, but agencies are often owned by groups. And for us, I think Pete and I, we kind of like to have much more, we like to work with the owner entrepreneurs or the shareholders, and I think, who are more autonomous, who we can go in, we can show them what we've learned over the past, how many years? Almost 20 years, I guess, working in agency world. And I think we have more influence around that. I always sort of say,
there's more immediate effect from our advice, isn't there?
Yeah, 750 turnover.
Can make a decision, then they can go and act on it straight away, and and then we can come back the next month, and there's more things to do. But if we worked for, the subsidiary of a group company who owned an agency, it would go up the chain of command, and perhaps our advice wouldn't have the same effect, which isn't as motivating to us.
Yeah. And how much of what you now know did you know selling Blue Halo, and how much have you learned?
Oh, great question.
Here's a great question.
In delivering for the 85 clients you've helped?
Well, I'm not known for exaggeration, but I'd probably say 10 times as much.
I wrote on my LinkedIn profile, I think 75% more, but it could be more than that. I was a bit naive. I thought that after we built and sold Blue Halo, that we kind of knew everything. But you can't, even today we learn new things every single day. So I think the truth is it probably is more like 95%. Because the world's moving and business is moving and we're seeing things every day.
I'm intrigued that learning then, is that you're having to help a client solve a problem, or are they teaching you something that you didn't know?
A bit of both, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, for me it's probably more having to work through the problems with the clients. And from my perspective, I came straight out of practice into Blue Halo. So I worked with one agency for 4 or 5 years. I then worked with the group business for another 2 years or so and saw 4 or 5 more agencies. If you think of all the different agencies I've been in, different size, structures, working on different types, different spaces with different sectors, it's kind of applying all the knowledge that I've got, but with different people, and there's often different outcomes, which provides learning all the time.
And for example, we can go into an agency. A lot of the time, agencies want us to come in to help validate what they're doing right as much as what they're doing wrong. Okay. And by validating what they're doing well and benchmarking what they do well, sometimes we're like, wow, you're actually doing something better than anyone we've come across. How are you doing that? And then we do learn that way. But of course, hopefully the things that we're then bringing is the things that they're not doing so well. And we're able to share those and also share what best in class looks like. It's not anti-competitive either, because often it's not something directly that's unique to anyone. It's just a subtlety in there, an idiosyncrasy in the way that they're approaching a particular problem.
Yeah, well, it's just, you're bringing in that external benchmark, aren't you? Where, so, somebody runs a meeting well, and you just say, look, you run really great meetings, or somebody runs a meeting poorly, and you guys could probably be 40% more productive if you just fix that, even if nothing else got changed.
Yeah, definitely. There's no question. Every day we walk away and go, wow, that's amazing. There's something comes out of the business, the data, the approach. In fact, the recent one for me really actually was, I've been working this business a long time now, but we got asked to go to America last year to go and help a client. We travelled over to Boise, Idaho, and the agency's approach to branding was just simply better than any other agency we've been into. And we kind of realised that sort of tech startups are really good at telling their story, because they're always trying to raise money, they're pivoting, they've always got great stories. But actually agencies who think would have great stories, because often there's creativity or brand at the heart of what they do, often are quite poor at their storytelling. And we went to Boise and we saw, didn't we? It was a great agency and actually came back really and sort of said to a lot of the UKs who we work with, look, we've just got to work better on your brand story. And then recently we've got a client in Scotland called May Brave, and walked in and was like, after 8 years in this job, finally walked in an agency and thought, wow, these guys just do their agency branding, and not only their clients' brand, but their own branding. Just
great story as well.
Great, and actually it's already now set a benchmark for everybody else to.
What's their story?
As in me telling their story.
Yeah. I mean,
you should get him on actually, because they've got this great video. They just filled their whole office up with those little plastic balls and their meeting room. The story.
What's he called? I'll get him on.
It's Andrew Dobby, and they. The sort of the quick story was, had a child and just decided that he didn't want to necessarily work for somebody else and wanted to see his son grow up. He had like a few £100 in the bank, and literally in a small box went and set an agency up. And I think the whole premise was, why would someone pay £3.99 for a cup of coffee when it should only cost 99p? Well, they do that because there's a green logo on it, and that's the value of brand. Yeah. So and that was his basic story. Hope I told it well, Andrew. and but it's more than that, much more than that, because they live and breathe every single touch point in their business. I mean, the thing I love the most when you go in the office, they obviously know that their target audience is sort of 35 to 45-year-olds. So what you've got is every toy that you had as a child. So when you walk in there's something, like there was a Batman car that fires matchsticks out the back. I remember that I was 9 years old. And so you go in and there's an emotional connection to the business, because you're like, I had that car when I was younger, and all of a sudden you get, that anchoring back to that memory of being, where we're young and happy and old and miserable. No, I'm joking. But it's little things like that, tiny little things they do very, very well. How long
have they been going now? 7 or 8 years, and they haven't lost that story. It's still part of their DNA, and they still tell that story. I think the point Spencer's making is that sometimes when we go into our clients, they had that in the beginning, and then it gets lost, and then they're kind of searching for their purpose or their why, and it's, why did we set this agency up? And they all know and can tell the story, but there's nothing out there to connect the clients with them emotionally to why they started their agency or why they're doing it.
Or new prospective employees.
Well, yeah.
Just that.
That's even more important in some cases.
Yeah, here's a business with a purpose.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted to change something, do something. If they set the business up for that purpose, does that flow through into their work-life balance ethos?
If they think work-life balance is important, I guess, to their particular purpose. I mean, I think there's some business out there where the culture's like everyone's there, and there's something that's very important to have the work-life balance. I think most agencies, on the whole, I would say, are much more progressive with culture than other types of businesses. I mean, most brands and organisations, when they have an agency, they kind of almost go, I'd like to work in here, because they were one of the first people to have the beanbags and the tennis, to make the workplaces, with the tech businesses, by the way, I mean, the tech and agencies, I say, are right at the forefront of this. They have flexible working before probably a lot of large organisations put it in. As you've had from your own podcast, they have unlimited holiday. They have all of those kinds of benefits. Well, I saw unlimited holiday today. Elvis, the agency, has just brought in. So they tend to bring a lot of the new working practices earlier than, let's say, the general marketplace. So I think agencies are quite good when it comes to, although, and this is quite a contentious subject, I think the biggest stress that probably comes into agencies is actually the client demands. The demands of the clients can be quite, because they're using an agency as an outsourced provider to solve a problem, or that they don't have the expertise or resource to do. So what happens is they sometimes can sort of, put a lot of pressure on their agencies, which is hard for the teams to manage. But yeah, I think cultures and agencies are pretty progressive. Flat structures, pod systems, they're all there.
So the pod systems segues me into the book, because that's one of the points you make in the book about structure.
Yeah.
Is important. So should we dive into that?
Yeah, let's do it. It's a specialist subject to yours as well, right?
Maybe we'll hold the pod thing. Why the book? How long did it take you to write this book?
Probably about the same time as it took to paint the Sistine Chapel. This is what it feels like. I don't know. I think for Spencer and I perspective, when we first set our business up, we had probably a bit more free time than we have now, to be fair. It was the early days. We were probably just starting out, and we thought we had some great stories to share. So we hired this girl, I can't remember her name, I feel bad now. Bryony,
yeah,
of course. And she would call us, once or twice a week, and we'd sit there and download stories to her and little tips and tricks. We started putting this Google Doc together. And as we got bigger, we kind of forgot about it, really. And then maybe it was about 2 years ago now.
South by Southwest, there was a lady speaking on stage. You remember?
That's right, yeah. Literally, it was 2 years ago this week. And we were like, we've got a book somewhere. You sort of search the archives, you're like, oh, there is a book in Google
And she
Docs.
said on stage, though, she said the only way to finish a book is go to a hotel, tell your husband or wife not to call you unless someone's died, and just go to it and lock yourself away. So we came up with a plan to do that.
We decided we were going to finish the book. We actually opened the document and thought, actually, this is a solid 6 out of 7 star out of 10 for a book that we'd forgotten we had. So we then spent the next year or so, I would say it was probably around last April time, it was really coming together. We went and spent our romantic weekend in Bournemouth together.
We did, yeah.
For 3 nights. That was an experience. As in, it was hard writing the book, just to clear that up. And then it was
probably Bournemouth.
And then it was evenings, weekends, dealing with copywriters, etc., getting it to the point where finally in September we could release it to the outside world.
We thought we'd only sell 130 copies, right? That was because there were only 16.5, roughly, thousand agencies in the UK. So we always had it in our head that, you get sort of 2% market share, somewhere like that. It's such a niche business book, right, to help an agency grow from startup or zero up to the first 3 to 5 million. It is incredible how many we've sold. I mean,
we're still quite surprised.
We got to number one in the Amazon, charts for advertising and also for marketing as well. So, and now 20% of book sales are coming from the rest of the world, mainly America, and that's just amazing. So,
and what's it called?
It's called Agencynomics. In fact, really, I should credit Pete because
I forgot to say I was also our head of brand.
Pete came up with a name, which is genius. And
it was basically the little phrase I used. When I used to go networking, I used to talk to agency owners and they'd always tell me that they were doing 400,000 a month. But what they were doing was taking their best month ever, adding VAT and timesing by 12. And rather than calling bullshit on it, I would say, well, it's Agencynomics. It was a little phrase I had to whisper to Spencer. I heard another Agencynomics story.
You know how people always talk about their business like they're a year ahead of where, well, some people do.
3 years ahead.
3 years ahead, yeah. And I think actually it can be quite damaging. And Pete and I realised that someone once came back to me and said, well, it's just not fair because Agency X is making 30% and we should be too. And I was like, I know they're not. I went in, they did it 1 month, right? That's not 12 months of 30%.
There's 2 reasons, really. One, to set the record straight and put something down about agency KPIs and the real truth. And secondly, actually, we quite like the name Agencynomics, really. So we trademarked it a couple of years ago, kept that safe somewhere in the drawer. And actually, when we came to thinking of a working title for the book, it was just like, it's Agencynomics. That's just what it is.
Yeah. We called it Spaghetti. Do you remember originally?
We did originally, in 2011, 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were like unravelling the spaghetti of agencies and how they're run. Many people wearing many hats and it's a bit of a mess.
What are the themes for the book then?
I think there's sort of 4 cornerstones, in business, but, especially in agencies. If we go to an agency, it's always one of 4 problems. It's either the sales and marketing, the finance and the cash, it's the HR and the talent, or it's the process and delivery. So we kind of mapped out really our chapters around those 4 areas. Yeah. And I think we shared everything that we thought when we go into an agency, that dispel some of the myths and share some of the practices that people and the approaches and the mindset you need to grow an agency. For example, a lot of agencies don't really know. I think where they think new business comes from isn't actually where it comes from. So we kind of dispel that myth and share our methodology from everything we've learned around how business actually comes into agencies.
How does it really come in? And how do they think?
When Blue Halo got sold, the CEO of the company that bought us said, once the deal is all sort of public, come up to our offices, we'll get a glass of champagne and I'll share with you the secret of agency new business. Now, having grown this agency for 9 years and doing marketing and doing quite a good job, right? We grew 1,100% over a 5-year period. We were a Deloitte Tech Fast 50, a European Fast 500 business. But I was like, there's a secret? Wow, no one told me there was a secret. So went up, met him, and he started showing me all his sales process. And I was like, no. Who's your biggest client? And he said, well, it's brand X. And it was a very well-known brand. I said, I don't know how much they spent with you last year. And he said, 8 million in fees. And I said, well, how did you win that client? He said, she's my next door neighbour. Oh, well, who's your second biggest client? And it was another major, well-known Japanese brand. And how did you win that client? So how much did they spend with you last year? 5 million in fees. So he's the best mate in my triathlon club. Who's your third biggest client? It was another well-known airline. And how much did they spend with you last year? 3.5 million. How did you win that client? Oh, well, the person in the marketing team's best mates with the person in our business development team. And so on. So I went through the top 10 clients. And what I realised was it was nothing to do with the sales process. Actually, there was a huge amount to do with the personal relationships and the networks of the people in the business. Now, that made me think a bit deeper about that and wondered how pervasive that was. We both sort of went back and started to kind of compile a big spreadsheet of all of the agencies we met. So every time we meet someone now, we always go, who are your top 10 clients and where has the business come from? And we went through £1 billion worth of pipeline. We're very lucky. We work with £50 million worth of agencies now anyway. So we're seeing £150 million worth of deals every year throughout our agency. So, we're constantly monitoring this. And what we found was that there were 4 key areas that new business leads were generated from. And what was happening was 90% of agencies were spending pretty much 100% of their time focused on the area that was only bringing in about 10% of the leads. So here's the example. So the second client we went into, do you remember the guys in Chester?
Yep.
We walked into the room, they gave us a tour, and they opened this door up, and there was a lady, and they said, this is Debbie from marketing. I was like, oh, hi Debbie, what are you doing? She had a whiteboard in front of her, and it had Habitat, had like Topshop, Top Man, all these retailers written on the wall. I said, what are you doing, Debbie? She goes, I'm ringing them up, and we work with Next and Laura Ashley, so we're ringing them up, and I'm telling them we're really good at retail and we should work with them. And I said, how long have you been doing that for? She goes, 6 months. I said, how much have you won? She goes, nothing. And I said, well, you won't win anything either, because you won Next and Laura Ashley because of the networking that the CEO did. And I'm not saying you never win a deal right from doing a cold call, because we've got stories. There's always examples.
Someone will say, "Oh, well, I won $100,000 deal doing it."
But the point was there was no mix. It's like they get cool marketing businesses 8 years ago on the whole, to go out and try and find new business. But when you're selling a service, people are buying your chemistry and trust and capability. It's not a product sale, as much as maybe it is in other spaces where there is a product element, there's a technology element, et cetera, et cetera. So we just started to perfect this methodology. On the whole, what we're saying to people is, create a multi-pronged attack on your marketing, and but by sharing where people get business from, it stops people spending a lot of time and money spending it on areas where they're not getting business from.
Yeah, spending it on where they think the competition is winning. And because they just don't know. And they haven't done their own analysis.
They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know what they don't know, yeah.
So how could you get more, if it's from the CEO? So what you're saying is the CEO wins through networking. Don't spend it on Betty in the back room getting on the phone. The CEO's got to go out and do some more networking.
I mean, that's, I guess, where it starts in the early stages of an agency. Of course, once our agencies have set up a better marketing mix of activity, they're able to get more brands to come to them, help the team build better networks. Because in the early days, the CEO is probably the only person who can go out of the business. But actually, as the business grows, you've got many more people who can do that. So, for example, a lot of agencies, and we've got one client who's got 6 or 7 people who speak in that business at events, and they've all come across with, because it's only really the owners carry a certain amount of passion, evangelistic. I call it manifest trust. They build trust through their authority, and that authority actually in today's world, where people can build their personal brands and their influence. Anyone in the team can do that. That's actually really helping to augment. So some business now say 6, 7 speakers in the business who are authorities on areas, and that's building trust and chemistry and therefore more leads.
But I don't think the thing that struck me about reading the book, which is why I wanted to get you on the podcast, is I don't think the things that you say are actually just applicable to agencies. Now, obviously, they might be more applicable to agencies, and the stories you tell in the book are agency specific. But I see that all the time more broadly, where clients don't know how they've just never sat and thought about it.
Yeah.
MDs who really have won all the business and then want to hire a salesperson, and sort of retire from selling, and that's just going to be a disaster.
I mean, that CEO of that £100 million business, I mean, I remember reading not long ago actually about the guy from GE Money, but he spent all his time still dealing with sales, even though he was running GE, not GE Money, it was actually GE General Electric globally. But the CEO of the agency that bought us, he was pretty much still in every. I mean, he rocked up for every pitch. I mean, he didn't necessarily do the presentation like probably he did when he was smaller because he had a team of people to do that. But his presence was still there because he needs to show the customer or the potential customer that, look, hey, you're an interesting, you're important.
Which goes to show how important that is, really. I mean, what size business was that? 50 million turnover?
Yeah, 50 to 100 million. Yeah, at that point, 50 million. And, he wouldn't go into probably every single small pitch, but anything of significance, he's going to be there to show the importance. You're right. We find a lot of people recruit salespeople in agencies, expect them to do all the selling, but not really realizing as a sales professional, they're much better in giving a lead than if they are having to go out and find them. Again, not saying there aren't people out there who do that very well, but if the marketing person in the agency and the owner can really augment some lead generation and then pass it through to the salesperson to help manage that process, to ask those difficult questions, it does help.
And you've got sort of a magic ratio, haven't you, for that?
We call it the 30-30-30-10, because what we identified was that 30% of business was coming from what we call NEST, which is networking, speaking, thought leadership and events. We identified that 30% was coming from strategic partnerships, which is actually probably one of the areas that agencies are either really good at or just don't have a clue. And then the next one, which is the most common area, which is client referring you to another client or a client leaving and going to it. So a marketing director leaves, goes to another brand because they worked with you before and they trust you and they know you know your stuff. They bring them with them. Again, it's a service business, not a product. So you kind of need to know that your agency's got your back. They're going to make you look good in your job. And then the last 10% area comes from what we call outbound. So look, every lead in your agency should be inbound from all four areas, but we call it outbound or the 10% area mainly because a lot of the activity was very much the push side. So it was the cold call. It was maybe things like PR, maybe it was things like social media. The truth is that area has probably grown a bit since, trust is becoming more, easier to online now, right? I mean, like people will trust people because of their persona online, because we look at if they're some position of influence, then it is building, but nevertheless it's still not more than probably 20% in the majority of agencies. So when we go to agency, I'd say they do 2 out of those 4 areas well. The agencies, for example, that are very good with clients leaving and taking them with them, or they get client referrals, they tend to be the ones that grow the slowest. Because they just rely on their clients to grow their business.
More inwardly focused than outwardly focused.
Yeah, the conversion rates are much higher. And then the people that focus on the strategic partnerships and maybe the NEST, the networking speaking, they tend to grow faster. And the ones that spend more area in the 10% area tend to have very low, because the 10% area typically converts about like 7 to 9%, because a lot of the inbound leads that are coming in from outbound activity, even like search, they tend to convert a lot less. And we've got lots of data to back this up. And there's some great leads come from that area, but it tends to be a lot more work. So there tends to be a lot more confusion in those agencies around the time they're spending to win and not to win deals. So that was kind of one thing. And then the other thing really was just helping agencies just qualify better as well, because that was, a lot of people going after leads that they had no chance of winning.
Bidding for work that they're never going to win. And putting time, in agency world, putting a lot of time and effort. Yeah. A lot of creative effort into a bid that they just can't win.
Yeah.
But qualifying is always...
I think actually because we know each other, right, because of Wirehive.
Yeah.
Because we both sit on the board there. And it's funny, Kevin, who looks after the agency partners, he always says to me how agencies just, he's a professional sales guy. So he's always saying they just don't qualify stuff. And I'm like, I know, it's like probably the first thing we teach everybody is, in fact, I think the pipeline system we use, people win about 50% of the deals they go for. Whereas when we go in and they're using some kind of CRM pipeline tool, they're winning like maybe 10% of what goes in there. So we get people working smarter on less opportunities and pitch to win, or if they're not having to pitch against other people, then propose to win.
Well, and then you can pull the CEO in because it's not so many and all of that stuff, and then you just feel more energetic about the business.
The momentum gets built in the agency. It's like winning a few deals.
Yeah, like winning 1 in 10 just makes you feel.
Well, it sucks.
It just can't be arsed, and then your quality goes down, and then. So what you said, that was one of the cornerstones. Then talk about cash, because then that gets Pete the chance to get a word in.
Exactly.
Cash. So I mean, there's a few things that are covered in the book, and I suppose cash flow management being my area of specialist chosen subject. If I was on Mastermind talking about agencies over the number of years, because actually most of them they do struggle for cash flow. So when I'm going into agencies, it's the first thing I'm looking at. Do they have any bank facilities? Do they have the right level of bank facilities? What are they doing with their cash flow forecasting? How are they managing their debtors? What's their invoicing profile? So for me, that's been, that's kind of the area of key focus going in. What I found with most agencies is that, and this probably applies to, any service business really, but it's been something that stood out for me, is that if you're making, less than 10% net profit and the debtors are taking more than 45 days to pay on average, then you never see the cash. So in that respect, it's going to be very hard to grow or even sustain an agency without having some sort of tight cash flow management in place. And then moving on to then having the right people in place, which is one of the things I talk about in the book, having the right person for the right size business. So you wouldn't go and recruit, it sounds obvious, right? It's not rocket science, but you wouldn't recruit $100,000 a year FD when you're turning over 750k. It's not necessarily the $100,000 salary it's a problem. It's the fact that they'll only be working half a day a week out of 5 because there'll be nothing to do in the business. So it's just finding the right person, having the right structure as you grow, and just getting the right things done, really. There's certain things in the business that you've got to have on time, bank reconciled, so you know where that position is. Your account's done within 2 weeks of month end, so you can see where you are. Cash flow forecasting, looking out that way. It's 1 or 2 reports like that are quite key, really. And it doesn't take that long with the right level of resource to get that in, just to give you a bit more reassurance about where you really are.
Yeah. And one of the big metrics in the book, Pete, as well, which does have an impact on cash flow, right, is the kind of the wages, yeah, which is something that's.
I mean, it's one of the biggest things that we focus on actually of our agencies, and I think we learned this a long time ago. I think it's perhaps something that we kind of found by accident running our business. We kind of had a really good, I would say, finger on the pulse as to where our level of resource needed to be. But actually, when we were acquired, one of the things that the CFO took me aside and said, look, there's a few metrics we'd like to focus on, and one of those things is wage cost to GP. So as we've taken this into our consulting life now, it's one of the things that we focus on. Having that the total wage cost of the business being no more than 63% of the gross profits is a very, very good indicator of whether you've got enough people in the business or whether you're spending too much money on people. It's the biggest cost in the agency. So, being at the 70-75% mark, if you go away and crunch the numbers right now, it's going to be very unlikely that you're making any profit, which is going to cause greater pressure on cash and stagnate any potential growth further.
And what's the secret sauce behind 63?
The secret sauce? Well, I don't think it's necessarily secret sauce. It's just looking at the
It can vary a bit as well, right? I guess in the swings.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of work with a number between high 50s to high 60s, depending on where the agency is in their growth cycle, where they are geographically. I mean, bizarrely, we acted for an agency in Liverpool, but where Liverpool is geographically, it's out on a little peninsula, so it's kind of isolated. The wage costs were actually quite high to attract people to come, and stay in Liverpool and work, rather than, trying to attract people from Manchester, where there are abundance of agencies. Yeah. So they're kind of, nuances to this, but broadly, it's come from learning from looking at 80, 90, 100 agencies over the last 7-8 years, really.
And again, those numbers will be just as applicable to any other service business as an agency?
Yeah, potentially. I think, if you're an accounting business, for example, you've got a very similar model. You sell time, the day rates are reasonably similar. But what will happen is the staff rates will be lower because there's a load more accountants out there than there are, brand specialists or strategy guys or designers or whatever.
Right.
Because there's still, I feel, a bit of a shortage in the industry in terms of decent people. So the rates for a service-based business are kind of higher than they would be. For example, I know someone who's a qualified solicitor at the moment working for a top 20 firm earning £26,000 a year, which is about the same as a graphic designer who's been there about 18 months right now. So there's your comparison.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, on the cash subject though, there's the other thing we see a lot is we go and sometimes it's the opposite, and there's loads of cash because maybe they've been worried about taking on facilities, they've been maybe protective over money, and they store up reserves. And we do still find that quite common. And then they've always got another problem.
Often the worst run businesses.
Yeah, and often the highest risk businesses. Ironically, even they've got loads of cash to bank.
Because they become, as they get more mature, they get quite complacent because they're like, well, we've got 750k in the bank, we're turning over £2 million. So we're in a pretty safe place, but that means that things slip. So they get a bit more lax at chasing debts. They don't worry so much about getting contracts signed. They don't get stage payments signed off. And then before you know where you are, you're in a place where I go into one of these agencies and I'm saying, well, guys, out of your 400 grand of debt owed right now, 200 of it is over 6 months old. And then it's a really big problem.
We had a case ourselves, didn't we, where our biggest cash client basically had the biggest bad debt last year because they took on the work, they had the cash, didn't really do the due diligence.
And the commercials are quite lax, but if you go into a smaller agency where they're literally fighting for every penny, they will chase every debt down. They'll get every stage payment signed off, every contract.
They're chasing sales, they're much more driven.
Yeah, so they tend to be the fastest growing businesses, but it's more driven by a fear of
we never had any cash and we grew fast.
We did, yeah. we were thinking, shit, if we don't close some business, we could be out of business ourselves in 2-3 months. And we always have that.
And we use every penny to invest in growing, to back into growth. And, not everyone does that, right? Some people want to have a lifestyle business and just stay the same.
I don't want to give away all the stuff you've written in the book. People should buy the damn book.
There's tons more, don't worry.
No, I know this. I just thought we'd segue into maybe culture and org structure. I know they're not necessarily the same thing, but it's sort of both are on the people side of the fence. And so what's you talked about pod structures in the book. And certainly that's something that I've used before. And I see now that people are describing that as agile management and it's the coming thing.
It's funny, I thought we invented it, but when you go out, you kind of realise that you talked about it from the infrastructure world, so the tech world where you came from, but I guess we discovered it like all good businesses, all right. You try things, you make mistakes, you pivot, and you try new things. And we kind of discovered, we actually called them eco teams because they were self-sufficient teams. And then we used the word pods because I guess it's peas in the pod and it kind of makes sense. But actually, so I guess we found it when we were at Blue Halo. Mm-hmm. We tried many different structures, hierarchy, and we just found that no one really, when there was hierarchies, no one really often people would drop balls and wouldn't take responsibilities. That was our personal experience. There was less ownership.
Yeah, that was the key thing.
And we wanted to find a way that we could get, people to take more ownership. So we'd experimented. And in agencies in particular, there's a big problem when they start. And there's a big historic problem because historically, 100 years of agencies, it's pretty much from the end of the 18th century when agencies first started through to the beginning of the 21st century, agency business hadn't really changed. It was an account director or client service director, an account manager, an account exec, and then a graduate at the bottom. And this kind of like hierarchy would basically look after client needs. But there were two skills they would provide, which one is, client services, communication and strategic planning. And the other one was project management. Now, when the tech world started becoming more pervasive with the digital agency started to build, they were full of project managers. And we had account managers, we had project managers as well. And what we found was that most agencies have a role, it's called an AMPM. So what that means is that you've got one person doing two different jobs. One is, and ironically, they're just complete opposite ends of the spectrum. You need a highly detailed, often more introverted person to do the project management, internal looking, and someone much more expressive and extroverted often, and broadly speaking, who can look after the client and deal with the marketing managers who are like them. And so what we realised was by decoupling that role from the traditional model and creating two separate roles, and then creating a third role in the team into a pod, we could manage a client from end to end, offer a client-centric approach in a much more sort of flat structure-based way. And the three people as a group could take ownership of any client from end to end and solve their problem. Yeah. So I guess that's where we started with it. Yeah. And then it
was about the ownership thing, because as we were growing, it was we need to spread the management of clients over more people rather than coming up to the top of a pyramid, because that was stopping us growing.
Yeah,
dragging you back into the business when we were trying to push you back out of the business to try and win new business.
Yeah. And I guess we're a bit weird in our pod structure, because our pods are just three people, whereas some people will group all of the creatives, the technical people, and the management into one unit.
Yeah.
We don't really do that. We say, look, keep the talent pool, the talented people who do the billings, keep them, in this talent pool, keep the client-centric pods. If you imagine, I guess, trying to explain this so people can listen to it, but if there were sort of three columns, we have the talent pool in one column, people delivering the work. We have in the middle what we call the client pods, so the AM, the PM, and it's someone who's a subject matter expert is the third person in the pods. So in a digital agency, that could be like a business analyst or producer. In a brand agency, it might be a planner, or it might be a strategist or brand strategist. Mm-hmm. And again, depending on the agency. And then in the third column, you'd have the people working on the business strategy. So you'd have the marketing, talent, HR, and that's kind of roughly how it works. But what we find is businesses we work with flat structures, because we use this tool called Office Vibe, they all have extremely high employee net promoter scores. Like, they are significantly higher. I mean, I haven't actually got
empowered, more engaged.
Yeah, I mean, it's evident to us the difference between those and by the way, we kind of give the owners a choice. Do they want to build a hierarchy, or do they want to? There's a choice there, because some people want to have 5 reports. You have 5 reports. You have 5 reports,
and it's a mindset thing, isn't it? If that's what you want to do, it's really hard if they've never worked anywhere else. I call it a leap of faith, just because there's no sign. You can try and prove it to people, but actually it's just an emotional decision, isn't it?
Yeah.
People are sort of...
Well, until they do it themselves, some people, they just need to be able to prove the model themselves. It's all very well going out into the marketplace and talking with peers, but some people just absolutely just need to get on with it and see it happening.
Yeah.
And we have a client, who's got a flat structure, and it's quite interesting. One of the account managers on her first day at work wrote this blog article saying, I've come to this business and I've just started, and it's really great to be in a business where everyone's equal, and there are people who know more than others, who have more accountability, more responsibility than others, but doesn't matter we've been here 1 year or 50 years, we're all one unit, we all work together for the greater good of the company. And actually, someone went on, and I think I shared the blog article. It was a beautiful blog. I mean, to have it from someone starting in a job as a graduate, and I saw about 2 competitors going, "Oh, that won't last. You can't scale a business that way." But as I listened to Peter Drucker, the famous management consultants. There's a summary of all of the talks he ever did. I'm going to quote this wrong now, but he told a story about how the British Empire, when it had looked after. When it was responsible for India, had run the whole of India on 1,000 people with no hierarchy. He was saying, you can scale these things if you actually, if they are scalable, but most people. And he said that he had, when he was at Hewlett Packard, there was like 250 layers of management, I think it was, something like that, probably back in the 80s and 90s, which just sounds horrendous. I mean,
just take you back, the eNPS.
Yeah.
What's a great eNPS in your client base, and what's an okay eNPS? So you said flat hierarchies were better.
I can tell you now that the last couple of hierarchical ones were, I would say, between -10 and +10 eNPS. And I'd pretty much say that all of the flat structure clients we've got are somewhere between 25 and 75.
Yeah, that's fair. I was going to say 50 average.
Yeah, definitely 50 to 60. In that 55,
we've got two at around the 70 mark at the moment. So.
And then, these are sort of maybe 30 to 50 size businesses. Because that's where we can't specialise, but it's
no. It's just I was with the client the other day, and they were saying that eNPS was 30, and the feedback that they'd been able to get from elsewhere that 30 was amazing, and so they felt that
30 is amazing. I mean, it is amazing.
So they were like, this is not our problem. And I was just trying to push them and say, 30 really?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if it was 70?
Yeah.
It's funny. If they tell me it's 50, I'm a bit like, you can get higher than that. The most important thing is they're benchmarking it, because you're listening to people and you've got to benchmark. A lot of people don't do eNPS, right? So it's like, if you do it, then you can, at least you've got we were speaking earlier on, I was saying that I've noticed that in December and January, these scores tend to go down a bit. People get a bit miserable through the winter in the UK especially. So there are always things that impact, the results as well. So
what else about culture? What else do you know about culture that people... so we've talked about org structure, measure NPS, org structure impacts eNPS.
I think when people are trusted to do a good job, they'll go and do a good job.
Yeah.
And when you remove power and authority, you just take away all of the politics and all the problems. The business just is more empowered, and just... Someone said the other day, it's like if you went out of your house every morning, so you don't ring up someone and say, hey, just letting you know I'm getting on the bus now, or you're not reporting to anyone. In your normal life, you do not have to report to people. There's a set of rules, right? You can't murder people, you can't abuse people in whatever, you can't break laws, of course, but in society, we don't need to report to anybody in life. We all go to work, and all of a sudden, we've got people we've got to report to, and we've got to justify what we're doing to it. And actually, it doesn't really make sense. And we all know why. There's a great book I always rant on about, which is, in fact, one of your other podcast interviews mentioned it. The guy who did the unlimited holiday.
Oh yeah.
No, the wages. Was it the way he was choose your own, select your own salary? It's Frederick Laloux, Reinventing Organisations, which I completely urge anyone to read, because I think by the time you've read that book, all the things you talk about, the Gallup survey and stuff, it covers all of those things. And he was saying, he just tells great stories about how, and it gives examples of very large companies where they've been they create this democratized workforce almost, and all of a sudden it creates just a much better working place.
Henry Stewart, who I interviewed a while ago, when he's doing an event with clients, he'll say, just think about the best piece of work you ever did. And then he says, okay, so now you've got that fixed in your mind. So was that because your boss managed you to do that? Or was that something you did on your own?
Yeah.
And nobody ever puts their hand up and says, it was when I was being managed. No, who wants to be managed?
No, exactly.
Awful stuff. What else? Give me one more other thing, Pete. What's another thing?
One more other thing. For me, I'll tell you, one of the things I bang on a lot about with agencies as they grow is commercial process.
Yeah.
That I spoke about it earlier when we mentioned the cash flow and the lack of people having contracts or getting contracts signed, or POs or that kind of thing. And it's just, for me, the one biggest complaint I have about working with agencies is just that no collection of individuals seem to care about it. Like the FD might care because he's not getting paid, but that always goes all the way back to new business. Did they get a contract signed off? Was the contract good? Was it explained to the client? Was expectation set? All the way through to, we're now delivering, let's get sign-offs at every stage, let's get invoices out regularly, let's get paid regularly. That for me is my biggest bugbear. So if there's one thing I could leave everybody from listening to this today, is to go away and kind of have a mini audit of your commercial process, starting from when a lead comes in to delivering a finished product. What are the legal, financial, commercial touch points all the way through? Have you got a tight enough contract? Is there good enough process? Is there communication between new business and project management, handing over? Do project managers talk to finance people regularly? All that kind of stuff. That's really
and also I'd just throw in the elapsed times, because what's stopping you getting a quote out in an hour?
Yeah.
Why does it take 5 days?
Well, let's speak, bluntly. It should be one of the most important things going on in any agency right now. If you've got a hot lead, for me, it's let's get the quote out. Let's get on the pitch. Let's go and close some business. It's not fanny around with something that isn't as important as that, to be honest. So.
Okay, so at the end of podcasts, I always ask people 2 questions. The first one being, knowing what you know now, if you went back in time, is there anything you would fix?
Is there anything I'd fix?
Well, and not in the sense that you have any regret. I remember having this conversation with Mike Tobin, and he said, no, it's not a regret thing. It's just to go back and go,
what about lifestyle?
Great. It would have been, what is the sort of
what about lifestyle versus scalable? I guess when we started, we went into businesses and we were like, well, listen, we built Soul, so you should do that too.
I think we assumed
we've kind of matured in our thinking now. Yeah,
we have. Everyone that appointed us wanted that as well. But I think the opinion has matured, and I kind of touched on it. We spoke about it earlier. It's about getting people now to a place where they have a choice, rather than we're getting you to a place where you have to sell, because not everybody wants to sell. Some people are, built to last. Some people are built to sell. But at a certain size agency, you do have a choice in terms of what you want to do. And we know a few people who run agencies between the 5 and 10 million pound turnover mark who have made that choice. Some of them have remained independent and they enjoy going in every day and being entrepreneurial and running their agencies. Some people have then gone on an acquisition strategy because that's kind of their next phase and they're really enjoying that. There's a guy on the south coast at the moment who was a 2 million turnover agency 4 or 5 years ago, and he's been on the acquisition trail now and he's now 13 million. He's absolutely loving it. But he could have got to 5 million and sold. So for me, it's just about getting.
Yeah, I guess you're reminding the lifestyle guys to squirrel away for their retirement rather than just using their drawings for their living and not and then at the end bringing us up when they're 60 years old saying, hey, I want to sell my business now, having pretty much just drawn all the money out of the business for the past 20 years and realising that there's not a lot of value. It's quite late now for us to help them. Yeah. So making sure if you go lifestyle, prepare for it. If you're going to scale, prepare, for the plan. And I think we've probably changed off. We're not as one trick pony. No. Let's say.
I think to be fair, when we first started doing this, a lot of people called us because of what we'd done before.
Yeah,
and there was kind of that. You guys have been there and done it, and can you help me kind of do it? But doing it now is not necessarily getting me to a point where I can sell.
Yeah, I've heard
a place where I want to get to achieve my goals, whatever they may be.
Yeah, I've heard. I heard people say, "Oh, yeah, but you did that ages ago now." That's why I guess doing what we've done now for the last 8 years has really superseded almost what we did at Blue Halo because we're much more current. With what we do now, we're working with much more modern businesses than probably we ever were.
We've also got probably 10 more case studies where we bought and sold agencies between now and when we exited out.
So what's also interesting as well is, if you were creative or an engineer, which a lot of agencies are owned by either creators or engineers, some are more entrepreneurs, those guys are often, I use the word often, less likely to scale organically. On the whole, like most creatives tend to grow a lot slower, a long period of time because they care about the products. And same with the engineers. They care about what they do. They do a better job than the sales-driven, entrepreneurial owners.
Well, and I find that type of people find it really, really difficult to hire salespeople because they only want to hire.
Ethical people.
Well, it's not
ethical, but it's like,
It's just, they sit in a room and they go, I'm not a salesperson. I don't really... So, can you sell? You can. Excellent, you're hired. And then they go, I've hired 3 salespeople and none of them. I'm going to abandon the sales process because every time I hire a salesperson, it doesn't work out for us, and they go back. They retrench back to their slow growth.
So on that note, Pete,
I think I knew where you were going with it. I think it was, probably, I don't know, it wasn't an epiphany at all, but I think having done this 2 or 3 times now with smaller creative businesses, acquisition has been the route forward for those guys in terms of finding similar size businesses that
those guys recently were like 18. Was it 18 years they've been going?
Yeah. So I mean, a case study I would give him this is a client we work with. We've worked with him since sort of 550 turnover. He's up near 800 now. He found a local business that was turning over 800, 400 GP, maybe 150 net profit. And the guy was in his sort of 60s and just said, look, I'm looking for someone trusted to hand the business over to. I don't want to give it away, but we'll come up with something fair and reasonable in terms of either a payment plan and agreeing the valuation, etc. And coming up with a stage payment profile for that business actually meant that, and I'll try and keep the numbers simple here, but my client paid £14,000 in legal fees, but added £1.2 million to the valuation of his agency on completion.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a pretty good
almost doubled his turnover in 1 quarter.
Yeah,
which would have taken another 18 years probably. No, or maybe not 18 years. That's probably a bit harsh.
And because he cares about the product, he cares about the people, he cares about the process, because that's his mindset.
Yeah.
Can probably
make that work better.
Yeah,
you're right.
I mean, I was sitting there saying to the guy, I think there's gold in this guy's client base. There really is some great names in there. There's what I call sleeping giants, really. Accounts that haven't really been farmed over the years. It's just the old agency owner, the phone would ring and you pick up, react, take the order and deliver the work. But actually a little bit of proactivity. And I think to get this right, we had a WhatsApp message from the guy the other day saying he had 300,000 of opportunities
already in
the first 6 weeks since acquisition. Just going to shake the tree a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's got our client. I mean, it's unusual. We don't normally work with clients that small, but we went in because we actually helped him buy out a shareholder. So actually, it was an interesting one for us, and we kind of liked him.
Yeah,
and we sort of stuck around, could kind of believe in him a little bit. But the fact that he separated the AM/PM side out meant that his account management manager could be more proactive and do that.
Yeah.
Whereas before, because they're project managing as well, they just react, which is what the other guy had. He was reacting all the time.
Well,
he's doing both A and PM.
Together, you know, look, I wherever I've been, I've split the similar role out.
Yeah.
You either end up with a PM who doesn't want to sell anything, or you end up with an AM who just couldn't project manage to save their lives. It's really super rare to get that person in the middle.
The problem is under £500,000 turnover for an GP for an agency. You don't really have a choice. But just everyone listening, just to know that. Normally we find about 650k GP. They split that out. So but all these numbers are in the book, which is, you know, the book's full of numbers.
So other than your books and the book you've already recommended, what 1 or 3 books do we reckon people should?
The reason I do what I do now is because I love business. And I remember leaving, I think it was maybe just before I started college, and I did a business studies kind of, it was a GMBQ at the time, 3 A-levels worth of business studies. And I remember reading Richard Branson's book when it first came out about 24, 25 years ago. So I love reading entrepreneurial stories. So for me, the Duncan Ballantyne autobiography is one I always go back to. There's some great entrepreneurial stories in there. It's actually quite a funny read as well. One thing sticks in the mind, you know, about credit control and, you know, only pay the screamers was one of his phrases, which stuck. And then the other one, actually, I read on holiday about 2 years ago. It's a recommendation from Spencer and Mark, who works with us as well. Maverick by Ricardo Semler.
Oh, great book.
And it is a great book. I absolutely read that literally non-stop over like a 2-day period, sat on the sun lounger. And it was a guy who ran a sort of conglomerate of businesses in South America in the 80s. But all the modern day working practices we're talking about now, you know, the flat structures, all that kind of stuff, he had in like 1981.
It's amazing.
It is
You're a fan of that.
I love that book. I love that book. He did a fantastic interview with Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
And Tim Ferriss is asking him about, because one of the things he does is in the book he fires all his old man. It's because it was his father's business. He fires the old guy. Yeah. And Tim Ferriss has told him, he said his dad went on holiday, so he took the opportunity night of the long night while his dad was away to get rid of the ball, because he knew if his dad came back and the timing he said
seek forgiveness and ask permission.
So he said it would be quicker to do that than it would be to change them all, because they were just also set in their ways. Which
I mean, one of the things in that book that sticks in my mind is that somebody put in a requisition for filing cabinets, so he gets everyone in at the weekend and they get rid of all the paperwork that they no longer need.
And they've got 50 empty ones.
And they now have a surplus of 5 filing cabinets to sell. Yeah. It's just that I don't know why that tickled me, but that's the type of.
Well, there were lots of things in there that I find amusing. You know,
Yeah, great book.
So,
What about you, Spencer? That's a couple from Pete.
God, I read so much. I've got
Reinventing the organisation,
many.
already
Yeah,
mentioned.
I mean, do you know, there's a couple probably. I mean, the first one I always talk about, which was referred to me by a good friend of mine, who I knew was a massive fan of Tony Robbins. I always found Tony Robbins difficult because I'm always a highly motivated person. Whenever I hear him talk, I feel like he's positive like I am, and I need someone different. But she said his mentor was a guy called Jim Rohn, and Jim Rohn, he says, is quoted everywhere because it's on the internet and you see all of his great sayings. But he wrote a book called The Art of Successful Living, which I've only got on a CD-ROM or CD, not a CD, an audio CD, which means I can't play it anymore because I've got none of them. But I remember listening to that, and it really it validated my mindset a lot, and I still go back to it now and try, put it on my PlayStation now to listen to it. But I still find that Jim Rohn had just a really good philosophy around having the right mindset. And it's funny, when I read all Peter Drucker's books, which I wouldn't recommend to read because they're really quite tough to get through, at the end he kind of concludes it doesn't matter what you know about business management. It's all superseded by mindset. In fact, he was the guy that said culture trumps strategy. Yeah. But he said at the end of the day, it all comes down to mindset. If I'm going right mindset, so I think that's one of the things we've probably learned over the last 8 years is mindset trumps everything. I really like Nikki Gatsby's book, Super Engaged, which is kind of, I'm a bit jealous of and envious because it's the book I wish I could have written. But we kind of wrote a book that covered every aspect of agency life. But I love what she's done. And I think she deserves a lot of credit for it.
Yeah, no, she was a great guest.
Was she on your show?
Yeah,
see, how did I not know that?
I spoke to her a few months ago, yeah.
Oh, you have to tell her that I recommended that book. But I think it's
almost like that bit that was set up.
No, I can't believe I missed it. I need to go back and listen to that interview.
Right, guys, thank you very much indeed. That's
great. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks very much for having us on.
All this information and more can be found at dominicmonkhouse.com/podcast. There you'll find show notes, additional reading and links related to this episode. You can also find my blog and the past editions of the Melting Pot newsletter. The simplest thing to do is to sign up to my subjectively not crap once a week newsletter, where I'll update you on what I've been up to, the most interesting articles I've read, and all things relating to scaling up, high-performing teams, net promoter score, company culture, etc. Social, you can find me on Twitter at Dom Monkhouse and LinkedIn at Dominic Monkhouse. LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me and share your questions and comments. Thanks for listening.